So thank you for being here and accepting my invitation to uh, talk with me. I was inspired by your dialogue with Mani in her first summit, and the depth and enormous bandwidth, breadth of your experience. You are somebody with a huge resume, but I'm actually not so interested in talking about your resume. Um, I'm interested
Red
in
boring.
what somebody is doing right now. And so
Yeah.
I would love for you, Kira, to introduce yourself. And
Yeah. So thank you for the invitation and thank you for having me. I always love discussing shadow with other shadow workers and what's going on in a very real and raw way. So my name is Kira Saundra. I'm the founder and curator of the Panther process. So it's a fully transformational sensory experience into shadow. So I call it experiential shadow work. So we take pain to power, fear to freedom into 5D consciousness. And in doing so, we involve different layers of art and sound, somatic, psychology, energy. So that's what Panther is. And right now, I think like most things, especially in America, we're in the middle of a big pivot and deciding where we're going and what we're doing. And without being able to have physical contact with people to run the experiences, we're in a place that we're translating everything online. And honestly, I've been so resistant for the last few years to bring any sort of online program because I think that it's a little bit boring. And it's not really Panther. Panther's such a embodied sensory experience. So what I'm actually creating now and what's really exciting is what's called the Fifth Harmonic. And instead of it being a course, it's more like a school and different layers of structure. So that's what I'm working on now. And focusing on my own work during the pandemic and during all the protests and figuring out what's the best way that I can be of service in this obvious shadow period.
yes, it's the connection with the arts also that really had me interested in you, which is very obvious from how you look and how you create your background, and then the beautiful website. Uh,
Thank you.
it's an incredible that's a piece of art by itself. Your website. People should just look at
I did it myself, so thank you.
it.
Thank you.
And where my mind goes when I hear the Panther process is, oh, that must be her power animal, or
Yes,
is one of your power animals, because
yes,
we can have multiple, right? Yeah.
yeah. But yes, absolutely. The Panthers, before I even knew she was with me, of course. It's the way it always goes. But, yeah, the bringer of medicine, truth, wisdom, and lunar magic of death and rebirth. That's her.
And so the way you work with people is in right now is in Zoom conferences or in Zoom sessions, individual or group. Is that
Right. So, for example, I run one-on-one programs myself, and then my apprentice takes on individual sessions as well. She's being groomed in the Panther Alchemy. And then I run groups online. We just did one last night called Alchemy of Anger. So it's different layers of alchemical somatics, different layers of breath work, and mirror work and exercises to
can you
sort out
tell me?
what we're doing.
Can you share with us a moment that stands out for you from that session, without of course naming the people, but
Yeah, so with anger, I like to keep the group size intimate because the energy is so intense and I want to be fully present for everyone there and what's going on. But the standout moment for me last night was actually a dear friend of mine that I haven't talked to in over a decade, and I've known her for 21 years. She was my very first roommate in New York, and she signed up for the workshop. And she had never done shadow work before. And for me, that was incredible to be able to give her this experience and recognizing, oh, hey, that thing that pisses you off so much about that person, that's actually you. and we're going to figure out where it is in your life and why it bothers you. And we're going to do some really amazing release around all of it and breathe in and transmute that space into the heart of it. And that for me is my favorite part about running the workshop, because you know how it is in shadow work. You always start with the trigger, and you know that there's a root cause underneath all of it. You know, someone could, God, I hate my dad. I hate my dad. I hate my dad. And they start doing shadow work and they're like, oh, fuck, it's about my mother. Or it's actually about the first time that I ever, you know, kissed someone and they rejected me. And that was actually the source of this pain for so long. And when you start identifying and naming these things, oh my God, what triggers me the most? Rejector, manipulator, narcissist,
Abandonment,
all these different things. And then we have the courage and capability to turn that pain to power and say, wow, I'm an abandoner. And I didn't realize how that affected and how that manifested in my life. And now I have the courtesy and the opportunity to myself to claim that and own that. And to see her last night at the end, just speechless and in her process and just in gratitude, for me, that was the standout moment for sure.
Well, yeah, and what I also know is that when we heal those patterns, like you can call it a recreation of childhood hurts, we continue to recreate those childhood hurts until they're healed, and then it's no longer happening, or we manage it in a way.
Yeah, right, and re-identify. What's interesting, I would love to hear your feedback on this too, is a lot of methods, they quote rewrite the story. And for me in my work, we don't rewrite the story. We learn to see other angles of the story, and then we integrate all of it, and it's okay. So instead of there being judgment around something happening, it's like, you know what? This happened and it was shitty and it felt bad and it hurt. And identifying and naming the pain and saying, and that's okay. And moving into the judgment around it. And so letting the experience be the experience. So in my work, there's no emotion that's negative. It's all surfing the black rainbow, as I call it.
And you adhere to Carl Jung's definition of the shadow, as he says, until we make the shadow conscious, it will run our lives and we will call it fate. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. And there's so many methods and modalities that they say, let's rewrite it. I don't think changing our history is what gives us power. I think identifying other aspects in addition to what we didn't see before gives us power. I don't think changing the story does, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You don't have to write a new story. It will unfold.
It unfolds and it becomes more.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's other pieces and other parts. It's like, for example, our perception right now, even during this conversation, currently my snapshot of you is you in this beautiful, it looks like to be a maroon or burgundy background, and you have these two beautiful artworks on the wall. So that for me is the snapshot. But the more that time unravels, the more time we spend together in the space, more observations come, more data comes, more sensory information comes that I can use to use a yes and conversation instead of a no but. You know, my father was unavailable. No, but he was, you know, it's a yes and conversation. It's yes, that happened. And this other thing happened also that may have felt more pleasurable at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so many people I find, again, I would love to hear your perspective on this, is that they can't really, their mind isn't yet wired. They don't have the bandwidth yet to take in that all that information happened. So instead they look right to, I want to release the pain. And it becomes, I want to rewrite the story instead of saying, let's incorporate the pain body so it doesn't hurt anymore.
So what you're saying is many people are not doing their work. And we both know, I'm sure people out there thinking they are enlightened and teaching stuff to the world, but it is not founded on having integrated all those parts. This is actually very, this really goes to the heart of the matter for me, because I have a passion for personal growth, and I have made a very clear decision that I didn't want to be a therapist or a coach, although I very much uh, admire the art of therapy and coaching, and I participate in it as a client.
Yeah.
Well, I love being in therapy. I love, with the right person. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. And so am I going to do a master's in psychology and sit with people? No. I've noticed that my juice is more in being out there as a messenger, sharing things, having therapeutic dialogues or interviews, learning how to lead panels, and learning how to be transparent about parts of my life that I've kept hidden for most of the time, that have lived in secrecy. And as it's miraculous. I was concerned, I just released this video with Mani about breaking the taboo of seeing prostitutes, in which I'm very revealing and about things that I've never talked about in public. And after the first few days, I was in anxiety. How are people going to respond? How people going to respond to this? And I'm going to be very selective in who I share this with. And then I started relaxing, and you know what? This is not about people's reactions. This is about what I am getting out of it, and my connection with Mani, talking about this. And it doesn't really matter what people are going to say. People are going to project stuff, and they're going to judge or not, or they're going to think it's great and courageous and meaningful. And some people are going to hate it. And you know what? I feel more whole since I made a decision to expose this part. I feel more whole. I feel, more complete. Just by
Yeah. Right. Well done.
because I think everybody needs to do that. We all have to get to the bottom of it, and that's how I think that's how we create trust.
Yeah. What's coming to me as you're speaking, I agree with everything you're saying. What's coming to me more is that this culture that we're living in right now in America is, we're so obsessed with the idea of being good. We in just like how we initially started the conversation, right? And bringing groups of people together to have a dialogue, and some of them just don't belong. And it's interesting, this idea of inclusivity, and we need to be good all the time, and everyone needs to be there. And the truth is that it's like it's become this cancel culture, right? That, oh, this something happened in the past that was awful and we don't want to deal with it, so it's canceled. Instead of integrating it, instead of looking at it, instead of it being a part of our history, which it is. We can't cancel history. We just can add. We can make it a yes and. We can say yes and, yes and this happened. And it's a way of understanding that all of humanity is light and dark.
Yes, well, you can understand it, I can understand it, but how do we deal with people's reactions? You like being a catalyst. I figured out that I'm a catalyst when I'm totally being myself. And this is a question for you. I'm totally being myself at a party, and um, and women often experience me as predatory. When I'm just being in my magnificent self, I'm not even thinking about sex. Sex is the last thing on my mind. I'm not even having sex, and yet people complain, oh, this guy has predatory energy. And
So
I
they
feel
feel
like
your
I have to
energetic penis.
apologize. I don't know how to be any different.
Right.
But what do you do with that?
I said so they felt your energetic penis from across the room. It's like an expression that that I use too with people. It's like it's as part of a joke. It's like, it's like we felt their energetic penis from across the room. Yeah.
But
So what do you
so
do?
people, if you catalyst people, they may exclude you, or they may say, I want nothing to do with you.
It's
Don't
because
ever
they
come to.
feel like it's because they feel unsafe. They feel unsafe in wherever they're at. And that's this whole point of this whole movement. It's, I feel unsafe, so it doesn't exist. You know, how about instead of just addressing it with you and saying, hey, I'm feeling like there's a sexual energy here and that's not what my interest is at. How are you feeling? Or how does that land with you?
Have people told you, I don't want you. Do not contact me again.
Have people told me that?
Yeah.
In my life? Sure.
Yeah. And how do you respond to that? Do you then leave them alone, or do you go back and make sure they see who you are?
It depends. It depends. It depends. Is it worth my time? Am I invested in this relationship? Does it matter to me? You know, I'm not really in the vein of pursuing people and giving them energy who don't want me around. You know, I've been bullied. When I was a kid, I was bullied for 10 years, maybe, really for a long time, most of school. So for me, it was not a safe experience. I was not wanted. I was not wanted in those peer groups. It wasn't until, honestly, there was a youth group that I became a part of in high school. And then for a while, I felt that I was part of something there. But even in that group, I was still the outsider. I was still different. So I understand, literally, I feel like since the day I was born, especially being rejected by a parent, you know, and abandoned by a parent, I was not wanted. So I understand that feeling. So for me as an adult and going through all these different layers of codependency in my life, codependency in relationship, codependency with friends, codependency, you know, without knowing what that word actually means and understanding that term. So for me, if someone doesn't want to be around me, it depends where I'm at with the relationship. If it's something that I'm invested in, or I feel like there was a misjudgment in that space and I feel in that energy, I'll say, no, wait, hey, that wasn't what was going on. Or if that was your perception, you know, but this is not my reality, just so we're clear.
Yes. Yes.
Period. And, you know, and then other times when it's outlandish and ridiculous, I'm like, I don't even have the time. You know. And
what that shows me is that you have really healed that wound and that trigger.
I think it's yes, in this moment, in this time, and we can say, from being shadow workers and doing the work, we can say that there might be a time in 5 years or 5 months or 5 days when something new could come up and I say, wow, that's something's there, that's interesting. And I think that's really the key. But have I evolved to a different platform in secure attachment? Yes.
And what you are talking about is belonging. You didn't use that word, but that's the word that's like flashing in my eyes. It's belonging. We want to belong. And the book that I mentioned in the green room before we started talking, I'm going to share that with the viewers. The Art of Gathering: How We Meet and Why It Matters, is a book about belonging, which is getting people together and understanding why that matters and how we can do that. It's very powerful. It's actually the thing that makes our life, is how we get together with people. That's why this pandemic is such a disaster for a lot of people. And I can see your frustration. You don't love teaching online. I think you don't. I'm
a visceral artist. And now I'm in front of a screen and and honestly, and as someone who does so much energy work in what I do, it's so much more bandwidth for me. And the cost that people are willing to pay online is generally lower, especially now with what's going on in the economy. So I'm spending double the energy bandwidth and producing half the amount. So it's a drain. It doesn't feel good to me. So I take clients right now very selectively. And if they're not super committed, I don't want them, period. I don't want them.
What about your social life? If your friends come to me, hey, Kira, let's do some Zoom. Are you then saying, no, I hate Zoom. I'm already doing it for my work. Please.
I talk to them on the phone.
Yeah.
I know it's I don't know, maybe because I'm not a millennial either. Maybe it's not my thing, but I'm not into this, you know, in my face all the time. So I don't really want to see the screen. For me, you know, social, it's like, I honestly feel like during Corona, especially since, so I was on an Australian tour. I was in Bali for a while and I landed back New York March 12th. So it was just as everything was happening. And it's really interesting because in those 27 hours I was in transit, the world had started to shut down. And it was rapid motion, rapid fire. I got out of the Whole Foods when I got back from New York, and there was no more shared Ubers. So everything happened so fast. But I found that as everything was shutting down, communications were speeding up, and it was so much mercurial information for me. It was too much. Like, everyone was calling one another. Everyone was talking about what was going on. Everyone was trying to get in calls and check in. And it was all for beautiful intention. It was just draining me. It was like, I don't want to be on the phone for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time, talking about things, when in a normal climate, let's say in a day-to-day climate, I speak to these people once a month.
Yeah.
Right. And it became such an additional amount of dialogue, where, as if we're in a group, there's so much energetic, subtle information that happens in the art of the body, in a subtlety of a touch, in the field of energy, in that, you know, 5-dimensional space when we're working with these different levels of energy. So it just takes so much more to focus on one area than it does to actually embrace, you know, it's like, for example, it's in the elemental way of speaking, instead of being inside the water where we can just feel everything, we're inside the ocean and there's not a lot of words necessary. It became more of an air element where it was all mental and verbal.
Yes.
And for me, that's exhausting.
What is inspiring you right now during the pandemic?
During the pandemic is when the Fifth Harmonic was downloaded to me. That's when it came. And the number 5 came to me, the importance of the number 5, the mysticism of the number 5, what it meant. So for most of the pandemic, I've been focusing on the Fifth Harmonic and working on its creativity and doing an egregious amount of whiteboards.
Explain to me. I don't know what it is, and many people might not know.
Yeah, it's because it hasn't been launched yet. It's just in pre. This is like new information that's happening. So the Fifth Harmonic is all the Panther elements, but I've curated it so that it works online, and it's a school with different facilitators, different teachers. And instead of being results driven, I'm super inspired to just say, you know what, there's so much information and so many different schools of thought. I'm going to present it to you. Here's the information. Here it is in all these amazing creative ways that we're doing it here in Panther, and with experts and all kinds of fun experiences and collaborations, and doing it in a way that presents to you the information and says, okay, now you actually have some form of, not necessarily, I don't really want to box it in as an A to Z, but let's say that you have a comprehensive body of knowledge if you want to go out and not only embody yourself, but empower others. So, and it all gets channeled in this interesting, I mean, I could go on and on about it, but it's very much so as the way that the elements connect, and the way that we were talking about Anodea Judith, right? The way that the heart is the balancer of the body, the way that how it filters in information. For me, I believe the pandemic is an energetic manifestation of where we're stuck in grief, and the way that it's attacking the heart and what it looks like, and the different levels of who's getting sick, and the sheer layers of grief that we've been avoiding our whole life. It's forgotten trauma. And so that's what the Fifth Harmonic is geared towards, is that full integration. And there's so many people that run these courses. They take Reiki for a weekend and they're like, oh, great, I'm qualified to put my hands on bodies and move their energy around and tell them what I think I see. And for me, it's so much more to have, okay, great, you have this piece of information, now study this piece of information. You want to work with trauma? Great. Do you understand the psychology around narcissism? Do you understand heart fragmentation? Do you understand different layers of the occult and what that mysticism is around that piece? And I literally have taken all these threads and found common denominators and put them together. And so I'm presenting a full wealth of information that's able to be done and connected and still be able to produce a visceral experience online. Awesome. So that's what the Fifth Harmonic is. So now, it's super exciting.
Harmonic, for people who don't know what a harmonic is, it's something that resonates when other things resonate. It's like a string that you put on the back of your instrument, and it starts resonating without being touched because of other strings that you're touching. It starts vibrating. It starts vibrating.
Yes. It's the perfect pitch. And what was the tipping point for me to even realize the naming of this was, I mean, first of all, the number 5 had been coming to me. Venus rules the heart. We're talking, Venus is a 5-pointed star in the sky. And just before the pandemic, I had the opportunity to meet one of the most amazing astrological icons, Rick Levine, in Bali. And Rick Levine and I became friends. And I'm a big fan of Rick. Rick is a fan of me. And we're really in alignment with so many things. And Rick is far and beyond a wizard in the cosmos. Rick is one of a kind. And I had the pleasure of him looking at my chart over lunch. And he opened my chart, and I have what they call a yod, or a hand of God, to Chiron, which is the wounded healer in the 6th house. So he takes a look at my yod, and he looks at the chart for just a few moments, and he takes something away from the chart, and he flips the computer screen around, and he says, "I bet you've never seen your chart this way before." And I looked at him and I said, I've been studying astrology since I was a kid. My mother's an astrologer. I mean, it's my second language. So I looked at him and I said, "I'm not sure what I'm seeing." And he said, "Underneath your yod, your hand of God, you have another one. It's the golden ratio. It's the 5th harmonic." And he looked at me and he said, "Your creative spirituality, that's who you are." And so so everything culminated and came together. But the 5th harmonic, I mean, that we could do a whole workshop on that alone, of what that means. But it's in sound, it's the perfect pitch. It's between C and G. It's the healing frequency. It's a 128. It's Venus. It's the pentagram. It's the cosmos. It's everything that is built in nature is built from the golden mean, the golden ratio. And so it's literally the building blocks for everything we know. And I like to do things big. And that's often my challenge, is because I'm such a visionary that I see things so big that it's the steps getting there that often, the details that often get to me. And so I decided, fuck it, screw it, Max. I wanted to present as much content in levels as I could. And the more levels you do inside the 5th harmonic, hopefully then too, the world is going to open more, and then people can travel, and then we can meet and go deeper and deeper into layers of initiation around this process. But it's not a course driven thing. It's really a body of knowledge that is done in my way.
Who is your favorite artist, visual artist? Or does anybody come to mind? Somebody you want around you a lot.
I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Okay.
I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Good. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I tend to read like 3 books at once. And then I put one down, and then I kind of pick one up, and then pick the other one up again. What I'm reading right now, I put so many books of mine in storage actually, but what I'm reading right now is this amazing book on witchcraft and medicine. And I think it's a brilliant book on putting together traditions, mythology, plants, and uses. So it's a very cool plant witch book that I think is really cool and integrative and really practical during these times when we're focusing on our health.
Yeah.
That's a really great book that I'm reading. I'm reading a book called, oh God, is it here on my table? Perhaps. There's one about shadow and necromancy in ancient Greece that I'm reading right now, which is really amazing. And it's great because it even brings in Nietzsche, in saying that Nietzsche believes in no God and that we need to destroy God and God is over. But he believes in Dionysus. He believes in this creation and destruction force and this desire of humanity, which is a full Dionysian philosophy. So that's a really cool thing to read. And I don't have it here on my table, and I can't names, and I don't remember so much off the top of my head. And then the third book that I actually started to open and read, which is The Quantum Mind by Arnold Mindell. And Arnold Mindell, who's the founder of process-oriented psych. So in 2009, I came to a juxtaposition, a crossroads in my life where I was either going to go get my master's in psychology, or I was going to screw it all. It was 2008, the market had crashed. And I was kind of out of a job, and I didn't really like my job anyway. I was working in fashion at the time. It wasn't me. I hated it. And I said, okay, well, I'll go get my master's in psych, or I'll go into real estate, because I knew everything about the business. And I was like, you know what? I'm such a hustler anyway. I'm so quick, and I love the art of connection. And I said, why not? So I was between these two things, and I was like, well, put myself in debt, or, not. And when I looked into getting my master's, I was like, this is so boring. It's traditional. I'm not going to be a social worker. I don't want to do social work. And it didn't speak to me. And at the time, I didn't realize that, I could be a professional witch artist. I didn't know that I had that power to do that for myself. I didn't know.
Which artist?
Yeah, a Jew witch, as I like to call myself, right? I'm this Hebraic Celtic Viking witch in lineage. And I didn't know that was an option. I didn't know who Anadea Judith was yet. I didn't know all these different amazing ways and practitioners. I didn't even know that Arnold Mindell had his own university in California. But I picked up The Quantum Mind, and it was said, where psychology meets physics and energy. And I said, what? And I started reading it, and I said, this is for me. And so I bought 8 books from Arnold at once. And that's how I started reading and getting into it. I was like, yes, so psychology can be process.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this continuous Freudian analysis. And even Jung talks about that. He even criticizes his teacher in that way and says, analysis over and over again just keeps cementing things in the mind and gets us nowhere. When how can we really take it out?
That's where your work is a combination of consciousness and creativity and art, creative process. What is a movie or a television series that is very connected to your work? In other words, where you get really inspired about the Panther process, about what you do.
A TV series?
A TV series or a feature film that has inspired you, and where you feel, yes, this is why I'm doing what I do.
So my favorite show of all time is 6 Feet Under. And it's a show that Alan Ball created. Alan Ball did American Beauty. So it's shot in that same way. And it was in the 90s, the late 90s, way ahead of its time. And it finished in the early 2000s. It was on HBO before HBO was winning Emmy after Emmy, probably.
Yes.
And I can't stress enough the realness and rawness of that show. And it's a show about a family of undertakers. And every episode, someone died. And they showed a snippet of how they died in the beginning. And then they flashed the years of their life. And then that episode was geared around this sort of piece as the storyline, right, and the character arcs branched. But it was literally about this aspect of that person's life that imprinted them in that way. It was so much about that in the beginning of every show, that death was their, you know, that the body they took in. And everything had to, the interconnectedness of life, the raw and realness of truthful dialogue, the fact that the perceived hero was actually really flawed and unliked. He was human. The way that they ended the show, I would say that influenced me a lot. It's a very intense show to watch. You want to binge them, and honestly, they're very hard to binge because they're so intense and beautiful, and the way that they were shot and the real issues they dealt with and what was on the table. It's a show about humanity and shadow.
Awesome. That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah. And I'm probably going to watch it. I love it.
It's so good, Max. You have to watch it and then send me a message.
The movie that inspired me to do what I do is a movie called Bliss, written and directed by Lance Young in 1997 with Terrence Stamp and Craig Sheffer, Cheryl Lee, about a couple and a sex therapist. And when I watched this movie maybe 50 times, and I gave a video of this movie to all the people I worked with in the first few years of my show, because it really showed me, Max, you need to go out and make art and media about intimacy, and it was that powerful for me. Yeah, and I became friends with Lance Young. I tracked him down, and that was the only movie he ever made.
It's amazing.
Yeah, he just what comes out of people. It was like, you must be a tantric teacher to be able to make this movie. No, I did some research. I mean, it's written like an intimacy teacher. It's amazing. It's called Bliss. So, how much does your work have to do with sexual intimacy, dark sexuality? How much is that a part of your work, and do you feature that in your courses sometimes?
It's interesting because I get pulled a lot to talk about femininity and sex, and that's not even a feature in my work. And the reason I feel that I keep pulling that energy is because I'm so much the embodiment of Lilith. And Lilith, even in my chart, Black Moon Lilith is conjunct my soul. Do you know who Lilith is in the mythology archetypes? So Lilith, you're gonna love this. Lilith was Adam's first wife. She was the temple priestess of Inanna in ancient times. And she got pulled. Yahweh says to her, you know, she initiated through sexual rite in the temples as they did back then. And Yahweh says to her, listen, I have this garden, I have this man, you should come be his wife, his partner. So she goes to the garden, and Adam says, great, I'm gonna be on top. She says, fuck you, do you know who I am? You can't dominate me, we're equals. And he wanted to be the master of the domain. And she says, I'm leaving. So she goes to hide out in the underworld for a while, and Yahweh says, okay, Adam, I'll go get her. I'll bring back your wife. Goes to the underworld and says, Lilith, you have to go back to the garden. You have to be with Adam. And she refused. And he says, okay, so for every day you don't go back, 1,000 of your children a day will die. Wow. And she says, I don't care. I will never compromise this of myself. And so then Yahweh made Eve from Adam. So she would always be submissive. And in my teachings, I teach because Lilith became, in Judeo-Christian culture, she became the evil demoness, the black-winged, blood-sucking, child-drinking character. And in my teaching, I believe that Lilith became the snake, that Lilith is the snake in the Garden of Eden. And she whispers to Eve, wake up, sister, eat the apple, see your truth. See the truth, see what's going on. And after they ate the apple from the tree of knowledge, they realized they were naked, realized that it was an illusion,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted out. They wanted to feel their own humanity. And so Lilith in the chart, Black Moon Lilith, is all about the unveiling, the unmasking of where there is truth. And she carries this dark sexual energy. And that is my relationship with Lilith is very strong. Lilith, Kali, you know, the tantric dakinis, you know, that's very much my lineage. And so I pull Freya, you know, I pull these ancient feminine energies. And so in my work, it's always the undercurrent because it's who I am. So I'm always here to trigger that Kundalini force, that dark energy, even though it's not always a turning point.
So
And
when it comes to, sorry.
I was hosting women's circles for a while, but obviously that's not happening now, in which we would do, I have a workshop that I run. It's one of my favorite. It's called Sex, Death, and Rebirth. And I do it every Day of the Dead. And that is usually just women. And that has a lot of clearing out toxic patriarchy, you know, because not all patriarchal stuff is toxic. I want to make that really clear. Toxic patriarchal things, yes. And bringing that out and through. And yeah, there's been many exorcisms in the room, and that.
So that work is more about empowering the feminine than empowering the masculine. Your focus is more. You're more about empowering the feminine.
I would say in that workshop, yes. I think for me, my doors are always open for male clients. There was a time that most of my clients were men that came to see me. I find though that men don't often like being vulnerable with beautiful women. And that poses a problem because they're wired different to say, okay, there's a different level of feeling or arousal or focus. And it's not a place for them that they feel comfortable crying. So it interferes with the work. I generally pull more women, okay. Although I wouldn't say that I do.
The crying and being vulnerable in men is their feminine. So there again, you are a big supporter of the feminine in men and women. Can we say that?
Yeah, I also am very masculine in my space.
I know.
I don't tend to polarize my work in that way.
Right. And your work is more about expression than about relationship. If I told you the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships, then you would probably go, okay, but
yeah,
you agree, but that's not really the heart of your work.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that the only way that we can relate to others is to relate to ourselves.
Yeah.
And for me, again, circling back, my energy is very dark, triggering, and
you love it.
And I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people come into your world because they love that, and
Yeah, they know, they love it whether they like it or not. You know, I'm a secret keeper to everything. Like you came on and you were talking about your dialogue with money and prostitutes and being able to have conversations and speaking on things for your life. You know, it's like great. I wish more people would be able to talk about, you know, their hidden sexual nature. Their experiences with prostitutes, because, you know, men, their experience with other men, but they don't talk about it. You know, all these different things I think are so important, but if we can't admit it to ourselves first, there's no dialogue that can be held around it without this fear of judgment from another, whether they will judge us or not. It's just a matter of, you know, are we able to actually speak about it and acknowledge it? I think there's a lot of shadow in tantric community. I think that's a whole other piece to that, per se. I think there's a lot of manipulation around sex. Mm-hmm. I think there's a fine line. I mean, that in itself is such an amazing dialogue, you know.
But people don't come to you generally with a sexual issue or an intimacy issue. No.
But it comes up.
What is the main reason why people come to you?
They come to me because they want to be free.
Yeah, yeah. And Pascal said the task of a free man is to make other people free. But that's the word man. There is a masculine in this freedom thing that has a masculine flavor, right? Or that's a masculine quality. Yeah.
Would you say that it has a masculine quality because you feel it's yang in nature, that it's expressive, it's the outward?
No, I think that men usually are on a mission to free themselves, whether it's they're trying to make $1 million, or they're mastering something, they're getting to the bottom of something, they're focusing, and they want to get something down, they master something in order to be free or to be independent. And I think that's a big part of a man's mission.
Do you feel that, and you feel that more so than women?
Yeah, I think women, the feminine. You know, a woman can be about freedom, but then I think that she is in her masculine. The feminine is about connecting and expression. Yeah, creativity, connection, gathering. I think my love to host parties and gatherings is a feminine quality.
Well, maybe it's feminine. For me, the way I perceive that comment is it's feminine because you're bringing someone into your home, into your space. And home, as we say, right, in astrology, home is the 4th house by Cancer. It's the moon energy. It's the sacred womb space is our home. So you're bringing them in.
Yes. Yes. And I like to create home. I like to cook, and I'm very masculine. So I get integrated probably. But when you say my mission is about freeing people, yeah, to me that sounds masculine, but that's not. I don't have a judgment or criticism about that, and you may not agree that it's masculine, but or you don't care.
No, I'm intrigued.
Have you has David Data been an influence to you?
I've read David Data. Yeah.
We would say that too.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
What is true strength to you?
What is true strength?
Yes.
Courage.
Courage.
Courage, and I don't mean courage to me means being fearless. It's interesting because a friend of mine, I was doing some descriptive wording on Panther, and I asked a friend, I said, if you could describe Panther, what I do, in words, and he used the word fearless, and I said, you mean courageous? And he said, no, fearless. And the difference is, he said, because I am extraordinarily vulnerable and I do it anyway.
Yes.
I do it without fear. Instead of a bravado,
yes,
it comes in, I'm absolutely gutted right now, and I'm standing before you with tears dripping down my face and a wound on my body, and I'm moving forward anyway. I'm a warrior.
Yes. Yes, great. What is what would you say to somebody right now in the pandemic who feels lonely and distressed?
You're not alone.
Right.
You're not alone. And I think the scariest part for all of us is to sit with ourselves. And when we do, we realize there's gaps between us and spirit. And when we feel that gap, it's terrifying because that's ultimately where we feel alone.
And we're not lonely when we are okay with ourselves and with those people.
Yeah, and because the thing is, it's the witnessing.
Yes.
And when another human isn't there to witness us,
yes,
right, we feel that sting of aloneness. And it's the art, right, in consciousness that we can be alone and connect and witness ourselves as an avatar outside in the witnessing or witnessing through divine energy. So when we sit in by ourselves and we're having a disconnect from spirit, and I'm not talking about, oh, we're not meditating or we're not, I mean, literally we're disconnected from the source that binds all living things. We're disconnected from our dharma. We're disconnected from our art. We're disconnected from, what that feels like. And we're alone in that. That's when we feel alone, right? Because we can feel alone with someone. That feeling of aloneness comes when we're disconnected from that piece of us. Yeah. And it's easier not to feel that when someone else is witnessing us. So now everyone is by themselves and they don't have the tools to witness. And it's absolutely terrifying, and they're not alone.
And then we go to self-expression, which you are a teacher of. Self-expression, yeah, journaling.
Yeah, I chuckle because it's taken me 39 years to be able to say that and realize that's my message. Spiritual creative expression.
Thank you for your genius as a shadow worker, as an artist, and your depth. Love being with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.